The South African musical Sarafina will go down in history as one of the most powerful art ever created. It was an art that didn't just change the trajectory of a country, but caused the whole world to pay attention to the plight of people in that country. And today I'm going to tell you the story of how Sarafina came to be. Before you do that, my name is Nenebi Tony. I'm a Ghanaian writer who lives in the US. On this channel, I talk about geopolitics from the perspective of an African. But I'm also an entertainment writer. My book is about the entertainment industry in West Africa. So the story of Sarafina falls right in my alley. It is an art, which means that it is entertainment, but it's also politics and history. So today we are going to tell you a powerful story of a young girl who changed the world. Before you do that, I would start with a story of my mom. So my mom doesn't care about politics. The only political issue I've ever seen my mom pay attention to is apartheid. And by the time I was old enough to understand the world, apartheid was officially over in South Africa. But my mom usually will still randomly use the word apartheid in casual conversations. And so recently I asked my mom why she became so passionate about South Africa and apartheid. And she told me that it started with the music. So when I was growing up, I knew my mom had Lucky Dube's cassettes and CDs. She had a DVD recording of when Brenda Fassie performed for Nelson Mandela. I believe she sat on Nelson Mandela, right? And also she had the CD for the movie Sarafina. I knew my mom liked South African art, but I didn't know that the art that she was consuming affected how she saw the world. But when I asked her, she told me that, yeah, when she likes your song, she likes you. So when she likes the Lucky Dube's and Maria Makibas and the Sarafinas of the world, she started liking the issue that affected them. And that is how she began caring about apartheid, and that is why she began becoming a big fan of Nelson Mandela. Which tells us that art is the most important part of any form of advocacy or protest. And I'll say this, if an artist and you believe that the message of your art is important, the most important thing you're supposed to do is make your art so compelling that people will care about your art enough to care about the message. Art before message. That is what I got from my conversation with my mom. And this story of Sarafina illustrates what my mom shared with me. Now let's get into it. So let's talk about what inspired Sarafina. What inspired Sarafina is actually a young 13-year-old boy called Hector Peterson. And to get to Hector Peterson, let's talk about apartheid. South Africans pronounce it as apartheid because the word apartheid is an African word for apartness. Apartness, which means that separation, which means that segregation. So apartheid was a system of segregation in South Africa where people were separated based on color and they were treated based on that separation. So black people were consistently oppressed in a way that reminded them of their place in society. Let me tell you something. There is a book called Black Beauty. It's a book about a horse. But because the title of the book is Black Beauty, that book was banned in South Africa because the word beauty and black cannot be associated together in the minds of the racist apartheid government in South Africa. That is how gruesome apartheid was in South Africa. Now, so in 1953, the Bantu Education Act was passed in South Africa. The word Bantu means black. And so that act said that all schools in South Africa that are black schools are supposed to be under the government. Government is supposed to have huge, control over all black schools in South Africa. And so the Department of Bantu Education was created. And in 1976, the Department of Bantu Education passed the law that all black schools in South Africa are supposed to teach in Afrikaans. So in South Africa, black people at this point spoke in English and their local language, whether it was Xhosa or Zulu. I'm sorry whenever I'm pronouncing that word and I don't pronounce it right. I'm Ghanaian. And so black people were learning their local languages and English already in schools. And the government said no. White people and colored people in South Africa speak Afrikaans, but black people don't. So let's force them to speak our language. Again, you understand how apartheid was bad? And so they passed the law to make Afrikaans compulsory for schools in South Africa. And the students in South Africa who are now required to learn even more languages said, no, we don't want to do this. And that led to what was known as the Soweto uprising. About 10,000 people gathered to protest this law. And they expected that only adults and older kids would join this protest. But while the protest was ongoing, school kids left their classrooms to join the protest. And the protesters were marching towards the Orlando Stadium in Johannesburg, South Africa. Soweto is a suburb of Johannesburg, South Africa. And so while they were marching towards the stadium, the apartheid police in South Africa opened live ammunition on these protesters. Yes, the government police shot at 10,000 people, including young kids, and also fired tear gas at them. And so while this was ongoing, the people dispersed, started running for their lives. And in the course of the running, a young 13-year-old boy was hit by an ammunition or by the fire from the gun of the police of the government of South Africa. And he fell down, and an 18-year-old boy picked him up and started running towards the hospital. Hector's sister was trying to locate her brother, and she noticed that somebody is holding my brother. So she started running towards the boy holding Hector. And while that was happening, a photographer called Sam Nzema captured the image of the lifeless body of a 13-year-old boy in the arms of an 18-year-old boy with another teenage girl running towards him. And that image was powerful. It was placed on the front pages of newspapers around the world and magazines around the world. And while African governments from the 1950s had been speaking out against apartheid, and South Africans have been trying to get attention for their plight from governments around the world, it was the lifeless body of a young boy that got the attention of the world. Governments were angry at South Africa. 3 days later, on June 19th, 1976, the United Nations Security Council held a meeting to issue a strong warning to South Africa. Yeah, that's all they did. They issued a strong warning to South Africa that, yo, what you did was bad. Don't do that. It's not good. That's all UN did. And so while the rest of the world saw the image, was touched by it, and forced the UN to act to, issue a strong warning to South Africa, the rest of the world moved on, but the people in South Africa did not, because that was their life daily. And that is where Sarafina comes in. Mbogini Ngema is a playwright in South Africa who was inspired by the bravery of the kids during the Soweto uprising. So she decided to capture the bravery of these young kids in a play. So she wrote the play Sarafina first as a book, and she approached the legendary jazz musician Hugh Masekela to turn the book into a musical. So the musical Sarafina, written by Miss Ngema and Hugh Masekela. And in June 1987, in Johannesburg's Market Theatre, the first staging of Sarafina was made, and it was well received. The Sarafina musical was so popular in South Africa because it captured the emotions of the people. And also, it didn't capture it in a sad way. The musical Sarafina has so many dance and up-tempo music. So the energy of the play was something of hope and uplifting for people who saw it. And so it became very popular across South Africa. And it was so popular that people in the US, especially black people in the US, who noticed the story of, apartheid in South Africa and how it connects to their story in the US, wanted to have a feel of Sarafina. And so in Black History Month in 1988, the first staging of Sarafina happened on Broadway in New York. And Sarafina became the first African story to be told on Broadway in New York. And it also remains one of the longest running Black altered plays to be staged on Broadway in New York. It was staged for 2 years. There were 597 performances of Sarafina. Young girl who played the lead character Sarafina, Liliti Kumalo, was nominated for a Tony Award. Tony is the highest award given in the theater industry, right? She was nominated for the best actress in that. She didn't win it, but she won the best stage actress at the NAACP Image Award. And in 1989, a year after, the play Sarafina, a documentary was made of it, and it was called Voices of Sarafina. It was shown in Cannes Film Festival in France, and it was also well received. And in 1990, Nelson Mandela was released from jail. And when Nelson Mandela was released from jail, it sparked the world's interest in the story of Sarafina again. So Hollywood decided to become part of the story of Sarafina. And so the film we know as Sarafina, because almost everybody who is my age or younger, or even almost everybody in the world who know about Sarafina from the film, right? And so the film Sarafina came out in 1992. It was a Hollywood film that was directed by a South African director, but one of the lead actors was the Hollywood actress Whoopi Goldberg. I remember the story of Sarafina because of Whoopi Goldberg, because of this. You know, when I was from the age of 9 onwards, I fell in love with reading and books and the library. So I was registered to 3 libraries, the Ashanti Library and the 4 Garrison Schools Library in the barracks where I grew up, and British Council Library, which is the Bougie Library in Kumasi where I grew up. And one of these days, when I was going to the 4 Garrison Schools Library, one of my classmates, I call her Mama Baby because her name is Baby, but she always acted like she was my mom, so I call her Mama Baby. Mama Baby asked me, Tony, we go to the library today? I was like, yes. I was like, I'll come with you. I'm like, I didn't know you went to the library. He said, yeah, there is a book in the library about Sarafina's teacher. Apparently, in our library, there was a session on books about American celebrities like Whoopi Goldberg and Arnold Schwarzenegger and the rest. So she told me that, and I asked, who is Sarafina? And she said, she's a South African girl. You know this song, Freedom is Coming Tomorrow. I knew the song, but I didn't know where the song came from. And I thought, oh, okay. So we went to the library. She took the book by Whoopi Goldberg. I remember that day I took a book by Arnold Schwarzenegger because men and women are different. Arnold Schwarzenegger was my favorite actor. And so I ended up, knowing that a movie existed called Sarafina, and it didn't mean anything to me. And so a few years later, when I didn't grow up with my mom, I grew up with my dad and stepmom. When I visited my mom and I went to her room, I saw the movie Sarafina in her hall and I watched it. Wow, that touched me. That was one of the most beautiful films I've ever seen. I've seen a movie, Sarafina, a few times. And also, the thing about Sarafina that stood up to me was this. I'm a Disney kid. I love Disney movies. But almost every Disney movie I watched were just white people. And I didn't have any issue with that. I loved it. But Sarafina was like a Disney movie, but it was set in a world I knew and I understood. And so that is why Sarafina meant so much to me personally. The fact that it was a movie that comes from a genre or the type of movies I like to watch, but also was set in a world I know. And that is the power of art, right? Art makes you see yourself, and art makes you understand the world. The story of Sarafina is why, personally, I started caring about the politics in South Africa. And from then on, whenever I'm watching the news and I see South Africa, I'll pay attention. Whenever I see something related to South Africa, I paid attention. So I started paying attention to South Africa because my friend Mama Baby told me about Sarafina. A few years later, I watched it and what's the name? It became part of my life, right? The reason why I didn't know about Sarafina is because Sarafina came out in 1992. By the time I heard about it, somewhere in the 2000s, it didn't mean much to me, right? But as I'm getting older, it has come to mean the world to me, right? But more importantly, you remember that I said they were protesting language? When the South African Constitution was drawn in 1996, it made 11 languages the official language of South Africa. And it made it that all 11 official languages will be used equally and will be given the same level of respect. So the story of the Soweto uprising, sad as it was, led to the story of Sarafina. The story of Sarafina led to the world we live in today, where whenever you are on Twitter and you are arguing with South Africans, they start speaking a language you don't. Because almost every South African these days speak more than 3 or 4 languages, because the love and respect for every language is now part of the culture in South Africa. So Sarafina changed the world. Hector Peterson changed the world. The Soweto uprising changed the world. If you're an artist, think about this. Your art could change the world. I am an artist. That's always what I'm thinking about. Speak my truth. What means the world to me? What do I care about? Don't care about making a difference. Care about speaking your truth. And when you care about speaking your truth will make a difference. That's what I wanted to talk about. Thank you for watching. And subscribe to my channel if you like stories like this. I will make another video about Nelson Mandela, because there's an interesting story about Nelson Mandela people don't know about. I'll share it with you. It has to do with the CIA. Talk to you later.